Howdy, Michael, the Mercedes guy here, and we're going to be replacing brake shoes. This is pretty much the same job on 114, 115, 116, 123 cars. Of course, we got it in the air, the tires off, jack stands, of course, and there's a neat little place to support the car on the subframe, not the A-arm, but at the front of the subframe there's a spot that has a detent, and you can place the Y of the jack stand right there on each side. Then we pull off the caliper. You don't have to disconnect the hose. You can just let the caliper hang by a piece of wire. I don't recommend letting the caliper hang by the hose. You want a little piece of wire up to this arm here. Man, those are tight. Now, you got to be real careful when you're doing the bottom one, because this hose is right here. So you can only loosen just a little bit before you run into it. You can break it off if you aren't careful. Break off the hose coupling. So be careful of the bottom one. Now, since there's a lip on this rotor, I won't be able to pull the caliper off unless I slightly compress these pistons to get the pads in a little bit so that they aren't caught by the lip. So a couple of pry bars right here. And there we go. Now I'm going to get a piece of wire to support that. Get a wire there. That way we aren't putting any undue stress on that hose. Okay, now let's see how loose this rotor's going to be. Man, that sucker is on there. That is not budging. Well, I relocated the caliper up on top of the half shaft and thought I'd give it a bash with my big hammer, and sure enough, right through here where the caliper was, it loosened it, and it comes off easy. And it's a little scored, but it will suffice. And looky here, there's no lining at all on that shoe. No wonder the emergency brakes wouldn't work. Now, do note that there is an adjustment for the emergency brakes. Let me get a light here so that we can see it real good. This adjuster right here, if you can't get your combination drum rotor off, it may be that the emergency brakes have made a channel inside the drum here, and you have to back off the shoes to get that sucker out of there. So to back them off with the rotor on, you look through one of these lug bolt holes and you spot this adjuster, and you can reach right through that hole and turn it one way, backs it off, and the other way tightens. So just so you know, that's how that's done. Okay, now we're going to disassemble these emergency brake shoes, and mind you, this is not fun. If you're thinking of doing this yourself, take it to a brake place unless you've done it before, because there's very little room to get in here to turn these springs that hold the shoes to the backing plate. And you can barely get a pair of brake spring pliers in there. But we're going to do it. Okay, these hold down springs that actually hold the brake shoe to the backing plate, they're like this. And this one's broke, but we've got a new one in our kit. Let's see that kit, please. And this is what they look like. Now, these are a pain to get out. This spring goes through a hole in the backing plate, and you can make a tool like this by using a grinder on a screwdriver, right? And that's what you're going to push. You're going to go through the hole here and push on that spring and turn it. But the problem is, you can keep turning and turning and turning, and that hook just won't go through the hole. So, you make a second tool, like so. I'm going to move my light here. And with that second tool, you pull the brake shoe away, and you push on the spring. Now the spring I've already taken out. And you push on this part of the spring so that as you turn it around, it'll go through the hole. That's vital for ease of getting these springs out. Okay, we've got the combination drum rotor off, and before we do anything more, soapy water to coat everything in here, because chances are these brake shoes are original and probably asbestos. So this will keep the dust down as we operate on this. Okay, so the spring broke. Old, rusty. The hook's gone. This is what they're supposed to look like right here. So, since we have all four in this kit, we can simply just cut these springs and remove the shoes and replace with the new ones. Okay, next step is this lower spring right here, and you can just sneak a screwdriver in there and pry, and there you go. And get it off of the other side as well. And there's our shot shoes. And the old spring, got the adjuster in here somewhere. There's our adjuster. You want to make sure this turns freely, which it does. And the expander, when you pull on the cable, there's an expander right here. That's the fork of the expander. And there's a fork on the other side for the lower part of the other shoe. Okay, this surface right here, keep the dust down, you don't want to be breathing this. is pretty rusty, and to put the same or even a new combination rotor drum back on here, it may not get on in the same way and it will be cocked. So we want to clean this up. And just give it a wash off. Okay. Now do note for reassembly there is this locating pin. So don't forget that. Otherwise, if you try to bolt this up in a different place, it's going to be cockeyed. Okay. Now our new shoes. Now you don't want to get any grease on friction surfaces. So no greasy hands on these. If you do get grease, take a rag with some lacquer thinner and wipe the grease off. Anytime you put any kind of lubricant on a friction surface, it's going to decrease the friction, and you don't want that. Okay, now as you can see, there's a up and down to the shoes. The adjuster goes in this upper part. Impossible to put it in there. And then you install this top spring. We're going to rotate this all the way in, because once we assemble it, we'll adjust it. Okay, this goes over our hub, and it's pretty hard to see what's going to be happening in there, but basically we're going to be putting this notch on the notch of the expander, front and back, and our old spring is still in there, so we're going to use it, and then we have to hook the lower spring on the lower part of the shoes. Then we install these keeper springs by pushing them. Let me remove this. By pushing them through this slot. The slots are vertical. Almost. They're turned a bit. So take a look at where the slots are so that you know what position the spring is in when you push it through the shoe. So it goes into that slot, and then you got to turn it a quarter turn. This one is pretty much vertical. This one is about a 45. Okay, now our kit comes with a new bottom spring. But these kits have a much stiffer spring than the existing one. The existing one, you can't remove it unless you unbolt the end of the emergency brake adjuster. So we're just going to skip having to do that step because the bottom spring is good. We'll just reuse it in place. Okay, I'm using a hooked tool to grab the hook of that bottom spring to get it in position, and once it's started in that hole, in slot in the shoe, then I'm going to use a screwdriver here and push it in. There we go, all the way into the shoe. Now, I just double check the other one, make sure it hasn't come loose, it's still good. Okay, then we're going to put in these keeper springs. And as I mentioned, you've noted which way the slots are because these have to go in the slot and turn. Okay. Now, four-letter words don't help any situation, ever. So, just be calm and collected. I'm looking for my tool. I'm just going to check that one more time to make sure which way it is. Yep. Right there should go in the slot. And a quarter turn. And there we go. You want to test it? That's in. We can break out the champagne pretty soon. Okay, now we're ready for the front spring. And it's further down the shoe, so it's a lower level than the rear shoe. And get that in position. Rotate our hub. So we can get our tool in there. Not easy. Okay. Here we go. Let's just do a test here. Yep. We have them both fastened. Doing a wiggle test, see if it wiggles out. No. Okay. Now we're ready for the combination drum rotor. And even though it's chewed up a bit, it's an emergency brake. I would almost replace these. But fortunately, the surface is flat. It's not up and down like this, so we will be able to get probably 90% of shoe contact on there. And we've got this set up right here for our adjuster. So we're ready to adjust. Locate our pin. Then what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put in a couple of lug bolts here with a big nut on, so I can tighten this up to the hub and do my adjusting. Now this is very important. You want to shim these lug bolts so there's no more than maybe a ½ inch or 5/8 of threads. Because if you run this all the way through, you can damage your shoes and maybe your springs. So you want some space there. That's about the right amount. So about 3/4 of an inch. Just so you can tighten up the combination hub rotor to, drum rotor to the hub good and tight, so we can adjust those shoes easily. And give it a little wrap here. And you can see it went on a bit. Okay, that should be, it's up there nice and tight. Now we can adjust. Now, as I adjust the adjuster, you'll need to rotate this very slightly because, of course, that adjuster is changing its position. So take a peek in there with the flashlight and make sure you're right on it. It's just above the spring. So there's a spring like this in there, and the adjuster is right above it. So the angle is about like so to work it. And I'm rotating that star of the adjuster. And it's a slow process. And check to see if this rotates once in a while. And when it gets tight, then we back it off. Okay, I've got this adjusted now so those shoes are tight. So I'm going to back it off. There's 1 click, 2 clicks, 3 clicks. Okay, we've got 5 clicks. Let's just see if I can make it a little bit tighter because we want this emergency brake to work right away. Perfect. 4 clicks backed off. Okay, now we're ready to put our caliper back on. And we can leave those on for right now. And bolt the caliper up. Now let's just take a quick look at this caliper. It's obvious that there's new pads recently, and what I'm looking for is damage to the dust boots, these rubber boots right here, and they look fine. So this is good to go. And you don't want to be breathing dust, so you don't want to create any more dust than necessary. So don't be using an air hose or anything to stir up this dust because it's probably vicious stuff that has asbestos in it. Alrighty. As you notice, I'm a ways away from that, so I'm not breathing dust, and in fact, I'm controlling my breathing. So I'm going to inhale and hold it. Put my tool on. Okay. Then tighten with the big bar. To go here and do the other side, which is same process. Okay, you want to get these bolts exceptionally tight, especially since these bolts don't have lock plates for the head of the bolt. So I've got an extension here. Now, to get my extension on this bar, I'm doing a little trick here. Since this is a 6-point socket, I can take it off and turn it a quarter turn and basically get a 12-point adjustment. Now, you want to be careful. You don't want to be breaking the bolts, of course. So, you don't want to use full force. This just makes life a little easier by aiding my 76-year-old body here. Okay, I'm working on the other side now, and one thing I did on the first side was that did not get videoed, but will now, and that is to test to make sure that the emergency brake expander works. In other words, we're testing to see if the cable is bound up in the housing, because that's what happens. So my photographer is going to set the camera down and he's going to go push on the emergency brake as I hold my hand here to see if it functions. And yes, it was a success. The expander expanded. Now, if it doesn't, that means you've got to replace the emergency brake cable. Or it could be maybe something else is wrong up there where the two cables join together with the cable from the push pedal. So do test that, because now is the time you want to find out the cable's bad. Now, something else that I didn't video was that since we have brand new keeper springs, the way to take those old ones off is just use a pair of bolt cutters in here and cut them, and then what's left of the keeper spring you need to pull out of the backing plate, and it's a little bit tricky figuring out just where that is. There you go.